My name's Scott Thellman, and I'm the owner of a farm in Lawrence, Kansas called Juniper Hill Farms, LLC. I started it back in high school, but I guess that's the next slide. Anyway, 2014 graduate of Iowa State. Right as I was starting my farm, I jumped up here and went to school, which really helped me kind of start building a leadership team and starting out really slow, kind of just slowly building a system that we thought could make sense. I didn't come from a farm. Our family killed gardens when I was a kid. I mean, just destroy them. We could not even grow turnips. And so it was a lot of learning, and it was great to be able to make mistakes while I was in school, knowing that I was getting a piece of paper that could get me a real job. So anyway, kind of covered most of that, but our family moved to north of Lawrence in 1999. My dad's a doctor in the area. My mom was a minister at the time, and she's in Iowa. In Iowa, they call them county supervisors. But so hanging out at the farm when I was 9 years old, I kind of just started getting interested in agriculture. I started riding around in the truck with the rancher we leased our land to. Eventually got to go out to the Flint Hills a few times with him and do cattle roundups. And then throughout junior high, I worked on sweet corn farms, row crop farms, feedlots, just kind of doing whatever I could, mainly because I liked being outside. And so I just kind of caught the bug and kind of became interested in doing my own thing. So in junior high, I worked at a sweet corn farm for 2 years. I think I was getting paid $5.15 an hour or something. Well, in 8th grade, that's just wonderful. But yeah, $5.15 an hour, and I saved up money for 2 years to buy that square baler. I actually paid $100 for that one. It was being sold as parts, and it took an entire winter to get to where it would even run. But then I bought a sickle bar mower. My first hay rake had the metal wheels, and I quickly upgraded to a bar rake because it didn't go down the road very well. But, I mean, that very first year I did just one of the fields on my parents' property into square bales, made about, 800 to 1,000 square bales, and put an ad in the paper, and they all sold in like 4 days. And I was like, ooh, there's something here. So anyway, I took that cash, bought a little bit better equipment, and just started slowly building the farm. So throughout high school, we went from kind of that 15 to about, 300 acres or so about the time I was a senior. I decided to take a year off between high school and college to really see if agriculture is what I wanted to do with my life. And so I graduated in 2009, and I was not smart enough or could not afford, I'd go back and forth on which, but to get a round baler. And so that year we did 10,000 square bales, which was just plain stupid. I did done swimming that year. I was the fittest I'll ever be. So now it's just all out, I guess. But anyway, so that same year, I had some neighbors up the road convince me to apply for a grant for a high tunnel through the NRCS. I was not, once again, our family killed turnips. I mean, how do you do that? So they convinced me that, apply for a high tunnel. You're a beginning farmer. You'll get it no problem. And so sure enough, we put up this 20 by 96 foot high tunnel, and that was the very first crop we grew. With the help of my neighbors up the road. And so they marketed it for us at farmers market, sold it to grocery stores. It was basically just them teaching me how to do drip line and put seeds in the ground to where they don't die. So as we went into that summer and then 2011, we kind of started growing on our own. We applied for a second high tunnel grant. So then we had two 20 by 96 high tunnels, so that's about 3,840 square feet, if I'm not mistaken. And we did a Thursday farmers market in the afternoon. And it was great, except we didn't grow enough of anything to really sell it. It was like a very large home garden, and it worked for this farmers market because it was a really slow market. But it was a challenge because I'd go up to Iowa State, and my right-hand man who's in that picture, Kyle, and he still works for me today, would wake up in the morning, he'd go pick all day, he'd go to the market, and then he'd call and say, we made $40. And, that doesn't exactly, pencil out in the long run. So anyway, so we expanded to 2 acres of vegetables and then made the decision to really start focusing more on restaurants in Lawrence and at that point, the co-op grocery store. We got part of our organic certification in 2012 and got the hay up a little bit more. Throughout college then, it continued to expand. I think it was my sophomore year, so 2012, 2013, I expanded from that little Massey tractor to the big John Deere. That was wonderful. Graduated Iowa State in 2014. That same year, I bought that refrigerated truck, and we jumped to 4 acres of vegetables. And so you can see that truck probably holds 4 acres of vegetables at one time. But, at the time it was like, let's jump into it. If we're going to get a truck, why get a little reefer van when we could just get a big truck and know that we'll grow into it? Hay acreage grew, and, after I graduated and went back to the farm full time, I was ready to hit it hard. Flash forward from 2014 to today, 2018. We did a little over 1,500 acres of hay and alfalfa. Most of that's custom hire, and I'll talk about that here in a bit. That's about 2,800 round bales, I think, is what we did, about 3,000 square bales. We grow some small grains and some row crops. All of our row crops are non-GMO. It's not that I'm opposed to GMOs, it's just we can get a premium on the market for them. And then we grow turkey red heirloom wheat. And so we sell that primarily to bread companies and as seed around the country. So we'll get it cleaned and bagged and then ship it.
I missed the very first part. Where is your farm located?
Lawrence, Kansas. And so we're about 45 miles west of Kansas City. There's a river that runs through called the Kansas River, and so we're in the Kansas River Valley down there. So we have really good soil. Some of our fields that we grow vegetables in are really sandy soil, so very good for watermelon, pumpkins, winter squash. Others are of a heavier loam, and so it's really good for beets and lettuce and all that jazz. So this just kind of shows how we expanded from, that quarter acre in 2010 started out as 800ths of an acre, and so just that 20 by 96 foot high tunnel. So we went from just that to an acre to 2 to 5 to 18, and then we made that big jump in 2015 to 2016 to 50 acres. And that's probably the biggest mistake we ever made, thinking we could double in size. Because 18 acres is about all we could handle, and I lost a lot of money that year. I'm lucky I have a really friendly banker, because that was a really hard learning curve. And so, really in 2017, we cut back to about 30 acres, and we took most of that and we started planting organic grains on them. And so we've kind of slowly transitioned back to the 50 acres after making that first jump.
So you grow so quickly. Are you adding staff or equipment? I mean, talk about how this is.
Yeah, no, that's a really, and I'll talk about that some here in a bit. But no, it's been a continual.
Scott, can you just repeat the question?
Oh, okay. So she asked, we've gotten bigger. Are we adding staff, equipment? And the answer is yes. Yes to all of that. And tomorrow I'm going to give a talk. I'm trying not to incorporate too much into any given talk to where you guys don't get bored of me after this one, but we'll see. You guys will probably all, it's a good thing people don't grow tomatoes in Iowa this time of year, else get through them. Anyway, but yes, adding on equipment. I was very fortunate that as the hay operation expanded, I was able to justify buying large equipment, and so having that 130 horsepower tractor, being able to have that tractor, I was able to partner with other farmers. I'll talk about partnership here in a bit, but run a 25-foot disc, and so it was very easy to roll over 20 acres of vegetable ground and prep it because I had a big tractor. So yes, all of the above in terms of adding employees and equipment. But so some of the crops we grow, like I said, hay and forage, small grains and non-GMO row crops. We grow hops, but I will preface that by saying it is a hobby. I don't know how it is here in Iowa, and I know there's somebody south of us who's gotten into hops on a commercial scale and I think's making money at it, but it is a hobby for us. When I started at Iowa State, I didn't live in the dorms, and so I didn't make friends for a little while, and I wanted to have beer, and I was 20, and so I started brewing my own. So it worked out. So anyway, I started growing hops that same year for my beer. So anyway, and then these are some of the main vegetables we grow. So leaf lettuce, spinach, baby kale and bunch kale, Swiss chard, beets, potatoes, watermelon, pumpkins, sweet corn, carrots, cilantro, basil, Napa cabbage, bok choy, winter squash, head lettuce, turnips, radishes. Sweet potatoes are another one we grow quite a bit of. We grew 4 acres of sweet potatoes this year. And all of those break down into various categories beyond that. A yellow watermelon, a red one.
How many acres again do you have total? Is it 50 or is it more than 50?
So it's approximately 50 of vegetables right now. But then all together the farm encompasses about 1,500 acres.
That's what I thought you said. I didn't know if it was 15.
Yeah, most of that is hay. And
1,500, most of it is hay.
yeah. So we have about 100 and I did the numbers the other day. We have about 127 fields, I think it is, that we manage. And I'll talk about that here in the next couple slides, because we also do some crop consulting for people and stuff underneath that hay. But, this is a question I get asked a lot, considering there's not too many first-generation farmers out there that are able to make a living solely on the farm. In fact, there's not a lot of multi-generational farmers that are full-time on the farm. If I sit on our Farm Bureau board in Douglas County, and out of the 12 of us, I'm the only full-time farmer that drives 100% of their income off of the farm. Everybody else has a day job. So, how I did that, I diversified my operation into a large variety of enterprises. And so I'm going to go into details about that and just kind of talk about each one. So on the vegetables, we have about 25 acres of certified organic vegetables. The leaf lettuce, greens, squash, tomatoes, peppers, and those really come out as the higher dollar, lower volume specialty crops. And so like the leaf lettuce, we're only going to get 4,000 to 6,000 pounds an acre, but we can maximize revenue on that organic ground with that leaf lettuce. And on top of that, there's not really a market for conventional leaf lettuce around us. And so we package into little clamshells, little 5-ounce clamshells, and work with another grower. Actually, that guy in the left corner right there, he co-packs our lettuce for us, and so we can ship it to Whole Foods in Colorado and Kansas City and Oklahoma and all that. But really focusing on those high dollar crops, the tomatoes, and we actually haven't grown slicer or heirloom tomatoes in years. This is going to be 2019 will be our first year getting back into that with an expansion we're doing. But then on the conventional side, doing a lot more. Even though it's a vegetable, I almost call it a commodity crop. A pumpkin, a watermelon, a winter squash, something that takes up. There's a lot more volume per acre. 12, 14,000 pounds an acre. A lot more boxes and a lot less dollar per pound, but a lot of volume. It's amazing how many boxes you can ship, or just pallets you can ship off of an acre of winter squash if you do it right. So that's really our first enterprise, and I think, I think our very first year we did $2,000 in sales, and I think now, oh boy, on the organic side, I think we're about 150, which is pretty low, I would guess, compared to you. But we're also kind of less intensive on our ground. We do a lot more cover cropping, and we try to just do one crop in one spot per year. But then on the conventional side, we're probably at about 150,000 as well, so about equal. And you guys can kind of see the acreage difference and think about the different values per acre. So we have the vegetables. We have the hay, and so I personally rent about 400 acres of hay. I do not own a single animal. I don't even own a chicken. I'd like to get some cows, but it's not something that's high on my priority list. Something about having to take care of them every day. Just vegetables you can leave for a day, and it's usually okay. But yes, we do about 400 acres of hay. Most all of that's conventional. For years, I had about 200 acres of organic hay I kept. Last year, we took it out of organic production because we could see the hay markets were going up, and there was going to be a big demand this year for hay, and quite frankly, we just didn't have a good market for organic hay. We weren't able to ship it very far. There's no dairies around us. There's no organic feedlots. Kansas is a very commodity conventional state when it comes to, kind of that mindset. And so the idea of the organic hay just kind of fell wayside to yields and also quality of the grass. But around us, we still have quite a bit of native prairie, and so we bale about 100 acres of native prairie, and then the rest is brome mixed grass. We do have some alfalfa. We'll harvest our sorghum Sudan grass for that we usually plant as a cover crop. We'll harvest that for hay traditionally, and then wheat and corn stalks. Both round and square bales. I would love to do more square bales, but the labor just kills me. And so, we put up most of our straw in square bales. And some of our alfalfa because that's where the money is. But every day I just kind of wish I have a better square baler than that now, but I just kind of wish it would blow up, and so I could just have an excuse to get out of the business. But it's interesting. I'll talk here later as one of the challenges and examples of overcoming diversity, and diversifying your business. And getting into a new enterprise. But, primarily we do local hay buyers, kind of within 50 miles. But then we've made good relationships with people, Manhattan, Kansas, Dodge City, Kansas, where the big feedlots are that we ship down to. So a lot of it goes just about everywhere. Row crops, so both organic and conventional. As I said earlier, we grow all non-GMO on the row crops. It's something I believe in, but I'm not opposed to the GMOs. And I think that's a big thing to preface this is our farm has been built on partnerships. And that's been a lot of partnerships with very large scale, big operators that we can, borrow a, 10-ton manure spreader from for a day or a weekend. And if I, went to go borrow that spreader and then pointed at him and said, "You're doing it all wrong," I don't think they'd let me use the spreader. And so, at the end of the day, big or small, organic or conventional, GMO or not, we're all in it together of trying to cultivate that ground and produce an income, a sustainable income off of that soil. And so, I think being the guy who's not opposed to the big conventional guys has been really good for myself and really, I think, a discussion creator. I'm working my way up in Farm Bureau, and you'd never think that the organic vegetable guy would be working their way up the ranks of Kansas Farm Bureau, but because I'm willing to listen to them, they're willing to listen to me, and that's been a really big thing. And so when I do the row crops, if anything, I do them more just so that I can go through the process that many of the guys I work with are going through. That being said, our organic heirloom wheat, when our co-op down the road was offering $4.23 a bushel, we were getting 16, and we were getting the same yields and had less fertilizer cost in it. And so that makes the big guys open their eyes. Mm-hmm.
Two questions. The drift between conventional and organic, the spacing
Mm-hmm.
that you have, and then are you going to do anything with the hemp? With hemp now?
So very good question. That's probably a new enterprise that if we can get our permits this year. But the drift, so all of our organic fields are basically on their own pieces of ground. We don't have, well, I take that back. Our home farm now is both conventional and organic, but we have about a 50-foot buffer around anything that's organic. One of the nice things about being friends with the other guys is they call me to ask if they can spray that day. Which I really appreciate because a lot of farmers I'm friends with don't get that phone call, and they find out that it was sprayed because their blackberries start to die. I had a farmer a few years ago that killed about an acre of onions with Roundup Power Max, and he was like, "Oh, the wind was only blowing 15 miles an hour," and it's like, well, and so and when that happened, I didn't go after him for every penny he had. I didn't even go after him for the whole crop. I said, "You pay for the seed and the labor and the fertilizer that went in to start that crop, and we'll call it good." And I think that meant the world to him to do that, and it came, and boy, he calls me every single time he thinks about spraying now, because I kind of said, first time, shame on you, but but second time, I'm not going to be so friendly. But I've been very fortunate in that because I do the conventional row crop farming, I work with the big chemical applicators in the area. I work with all the other big farms to do my spraying because I don't own my own sprayer. And so they all know me. They all know where our fields are. They know where the beehives, we don't keep beehives, but we let somebody keep beehives for us. They know where all that is. And so if they ever have questions, they have my phone number. And, they aren't going to get me yelling to them on the phone. It's going to be a friendly, "It seems a little windy today there, Bob," Uh-huh.
And then as far as the 50 feet, what are you planting in that 50 feet?
Most always it's grass or it's a little chunk of wetland or a fence line or something like that. I'm usually not planting an actual barrier around a field. It just is kind of a natural barrier. But yeah, so the row crop. So like I said, we were averaging $16.50 a bushel on our heirloom wheat. We didn't have that many acres of organic soybeans this year, but we had some that we sold to another farm that got sold to a seed company, and I believe we were getting either $22 or $25 a bushel. At the same time, guys around me were getting $8.50, and so and we got 48 bushels an acre, which for organic in our area is pretty stellar. And then we did organic popcorn. I don't know if I'd do it again. I was really happy with it, but there's a kind of a success and a failure story of me not lining up a market for that organic popcorn. I'd love to find a market because we can grow some very good popcorn in our river valley. But, with that, we ended up, what we did sell, which was about half of it, about half of the 14,000 pounds we had, we were getting $50 a bag, and so, $1 a pound. And so that really starts to add up to revenue per acre when it comes to grain, especially when you're using, old John Deere 7000 planters and old Massey combines. But this is probably the thing that's built up the most that we don't talk about is our custom hire. I have 3 people that work with me on it, but we never see each other because we're always working. I mean, it is really kind of the quiet side of the farm that's a powerhouse. We do about 1,100 acres of hay, and then tillage and batwing mowing. So we maintain quite a few properties for different estates and trusts in the area. Soil sampling. So all of my hay customers, I have them signed up. Just about all of them. I'll have them signed up to where we go and do soil samples, and we recommend fertilizer, and then we go ahead and order it for them. And so in doing that, that was kind of an enterprise I didn't exactly want to get into, because the last thing I want to do is do more soil samples and then have people call and complain that their fertilizer bill was this much per acre and they would have put half down. But what it's allowed me to do is guarantee my yield on all of my custom hay acreage. And so when I was letting rancher Jim fertilize, he was putting on $20 an acre of fertilizer, and he was getting broom sedge in there and the undesirable grasses that showed deficiencies in phosphorus, things like that. And when we came in, because we know how to grow grass, we really started upping the quality and the yield, and that helped us increase our revenue. Because if I'm going to go over a 100-acre hayfield, I'd rather get 600 bales than 300 if I'm going to go over that same hayfield every year. And so that was something that, like I said, wasn't exactly something I meant to jump into, but it's been a really good enterprise that we don't. I probably charge half of what a true crop consultant would on that, but it's because it's a benefit for me in the summertime. And so it's kind of the customer appreciates it because we're charging less than a crop consultant would, but we're also kind of growing revenue for the summertime. And then the final thing is distribution on a refrigerated truck. And so shipping of, if we're in Kansas City delivering, there might be a grower that needs something shipped back from Kansas City, and so we'll backhaul different things to different farms. This is that kind of led into the vegetable brokering. So we started this in 2016, basically when I had a bad year. We had the Kansas River flood, and it flooded out a lot of our crops for more than 24 hours, and so we had to destroy them. And so really all we had for about 3 weeks was zucchini, yellow squash, and watermelon. And that does not fill a truck to a profitable level ever. And so I started driving up to a little town called Jamesport, Missouri, north of Kansas City, to an Amish produce auction where I had been buying my boxes. I went up to buy some boxes one day, and I said, I'll stay around for the auction. And before I knew it, I had a pickup truck bed load of Amish stuff and drove it home. And by the time I had it home, I had already sold it. And so I started doing that every week. And then, I started taking the big truck up to buy. And it kind of all came to a point where I really started to get into the brokering and the resale produce when I bought a pallet of eggplant for $2 a case. And so think about a bushel of eggplant. Beautiful. I bought it for $2 a box, and the box cost $1.89. So that grower was getting 11%, or 11 cents a bushel, and that makes no sense. And so that grower had called me, I think the next day, and said, "Hey, do you need more eggplant?" I was like, "Well, I just bought a pallet, so not today." But it allowed me to contact directly with him, and I went up to his farm and really just asked, "What do you want per bushel? What works for you?" And at the time, he knew there was a glutton. He said 7, and I said, "I'll give you 9," because I was able to get a good margin at 7 or at 9. Yeah. I mean, I took that eggplant home, and I think I sold it for 16 a case, and so I did very well at that auction that day. But what it allowed me to do is go in and offer a better price than the big wholesalers that were coming through. And it helped me start cultivating a really good relationship with these Amish growers, because Amish cannot be the easiest to work with initially. And so it was a really, really good partnership that went from, probably about $6,000 in resale and brokering of produce in 2016 to, I know we did over $250,000 this year. I'm not exactly sure what. But that's gone to the point where, when I was coming back, like I said, it was like, if it wasn't in the back seat of my pickup truck, it was the bed, to we're bringing home 10 to 12 pallets a week now. And we also have another truck that actually runs up there and distributes for them now too, through another guy. And so, on top of it just being a benefit to our business, it's been a benefit to our customers. Because, yeah, we grow a lot of different things, but a lot of what we grow is seasonal. And so when our lettuce is done, I don't know when lettuce season is done around here, but for us it's mid-June or even earlier depending on the weather. We start to slow down before our summer crops like sweet corn and stuff pick up. So, for them, we're able to have those tomatoes, June 1st and, just a variety of produce that we wouldn't normally be able to carry because we can decide to not grow certain things and let our Amish partners do that. And so it's created a much more diverse truck with many more products on it that makes our customers very happy, especially some of our grocers who want to do larger volumes with us. So, like I said, additional value to our truck and our customers, and it strengthens the local and regional food system, and that's what we need more of. If there's one big struggle our farms had is, as we scaled up, is we have to do everything. And I'm sure you've had to deal with it too on your operation where, if I moved out to California and I wanted to grow 50 acres of romaine, I got to buy a monosem planter, and then after that I plant it, and then I can hire a company to bring in workers to weed it and then pick it, and then that can go onto a truck that I hire, and then it can go to the lettuce plant. It's a commodity out there. Well, around us, you have to hire the labor, you have to have all the tools, you have to have the cold storage, you have to have the truck and the marketing department and all of that. There's it has to be a more vertically integrated system, but that's not nearly as efficient as it could be, like it is out west. So there's just a lot more expense in scaling up. And that kind of leads to the, kind of sixth enterprise I would say we have currently, and that's hay brokering. And this really started last year. I had shipped a lot of hay for a lot of years. We made our money to start the vegetable farm, or I made my money to start the vegetable farm in 2010, 2011, 2012 when there was a horrible drought across the country. We were shipping square bales down to Texas like nobody's business. 2 semi-loads a week right out of the field. It was very good cash flow, and so that's how we really expanded into the vegetable operation. But, after I graduated school, 2013, 2014, 2015, they were pretty standard hay years. And then 2015, 2016 got into really flush hay years around us to where it was so prices were so low around us, we were having to ship elsewhere just to get break even on hay. And then that completely flipped around in 2017 when we didn't have the driest year in 2017, but we had a dry year. And so before I knew it, and this has really taken off this year, those same customers I was shipping to a few years ago to get hay out of my region, I'm now pulling hay in from because they had rain this year. We had very little rain. We had no snow last year. We had very little spring moisture and no summer moisture. And so, as an example, just, I don't know, Iowa corn, everybody will understand. I have a field that usually yields about 160 that did 75 this year. So that's what our moisture was like this year. It was horrible. Most of my hay yields were down 40 to 60% this year. And so, what did this help me do? It helped keep my customers in business. And so by bringing in hay, making a little bit off the top to cover my time and effort, it's helping them keep from selling their cattle and dispersing it when prices are low. Right now in Kansas, prices for cattle are pretty low. And it's just helping them keep in business, which means next year I'm going to be able to sell more hay. So, that kind of breaks down the enterprises I have. And once again, why all of these enterprises? That's a lot of stuff to deal with every day and a lot of different people to deal with every day. And really what it is it's diversifying my risk. And I'll go in towards the end because I'm going to probably run out of slides before I run out of time. So we can go in and talk about the hemp and a future CSA we're launching this year and some things like that I'm really excited about. But it's about diversifying the risk. And so, getting those enterprises to help you balance out the good and the bad of your farm. As I said this year, the hay, we were down 60%. I'll talk about some issues we had in the vegetables this year, but, overall, it helps you take that good enterprise that was really strong and that bad enterprise and help, kind of balance them out. If we were all 100% in the vegetable game this year, we would have lost our socks. If it was just truly vegetables, that drought killed us because most of our vegetable farming is dry land. But as the second bullet point, when one enterprise doesn't do well, others are going to. The hay brokering did fantastic because hay yields were down. The vegetable brokering did great because another broker went out of business. So it worked out. I threw up this picture as an example. That was one of our first organic winter squash crops. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and we had a really good crop. And so we had like 4 or 5 of those truckloads come off of 5 acres. It was awesome. But right next to it, and you can see there's just tons of grass. We did not have good weed management skills, still don't. But right over next to that, we had planted about 5 acres of azuki beans. It's a dry edible bean that a company in our area was using in a veggie burger they sold nationwide. And so we did it as a trial, and those things just absolutely failed. And so, I lost money on that 5 acres, but the 5 acres next to it, I made a killing. And so it kind of helped, I guess a lot of my experiments and stuff, the good stuff kind of helps offset the cost of the stupid things I like to try. And then it's really about playing into the strengths of your operation, taking the pros of the operation and expanding on them. I don't think I've really expanded on any of the problems we have on the operation except for square bales. I hate square bales now, but it's also one of those things that got me started and helped me get into it. But really thinking about those pros, and this is a good example. And I don't know. I mean, how many of you guys are actively farming now? And then vegetables. Okay, like what size? I know you were about 25 acres of organic, but 5?
We have about 3 acres.
About 3? Okay. So yeah, a lot of different size. And so we were probably, 4 or 5 acres when we bought this refrigerated truck. So you can imagine if you guys had that truck, like hard to fill. And so the first 2 years I had it, I was paying, I think it was $2,400 in insurance a year, and registration on it and DOT and all this stuff to have it sit, 5 months a year just at the farm. And on top of that, we were using it once or twice a week. It was an asset that we were not utilizing. We were losing money having this truck sitting there. In fact, more often than not, we just go, we'll just throw it in the back of the pickup truck to make the restaurant deliveries because it was just quicker than filling up the big truck and getting it cooled down. Oops. That was one of our problems. And it's, like I said, we hit a slow summer season in 2016, and so we started, making that Amish run, and then we started carrying more and more growers' products. And so, now it's not just the 5 Amish growers, but it's another vegetable grower, 2 tree fruit growers, 1 in Kansas and 1 in Missouri, and then a berry farmer we're picking on this year. And so, we now have 6 growers plus ourselves on this one truck, and we're actually going to sell that truck this year and get a bigger truck because it has taken off. 8 pallets is not enough. There were a lot of delivery days this year where we were having to make 2 runs to Kansas City in the same day just to keep up with everybody's orders, and so that's fantastic. There's a picture of the Whole Foods team and some of my growers when they came out to Kansas and visited our farm. Down there is a picture of one of our Amish growers' pepper fields.
As you combine the different streams of vegetables, do you maintain the packaging of where it came from and that identity, or do you absorb it into?
So I don't require all of our vegetable growers to be GAP. Most of them are. Same with the fruit farms. And I think everybody's going to be GAP by next year. Good agricultural practices. It's the kind of a next step in food safety. Are you GAP? Yeah, see, I've dragged my feet because Whole Foods hasn't required it, but with FSMA, at the end of the month, we hit the FSMA levels, and so we'll be GAP this year. Really, I was waiting until we could build the pack house, but that's tomorrow's conversation.
I have a question about marketing to grocery stores like Hy-Vee or Fairway or something like that. Do you have a contract with them? We've had some experience with, I want all the zucchini you can grow, and then you show up with it next spring, and they say, we have somebody else doing that, and they sign a contract with somebody to only buy from them. And what's the balance?
So it depends. I do a lot of handshake deals. That's kind of even though in my area it's weird to see somebody with spreadsheets and I don't know, somebody with a degree doing farming of this type. I was raised by good old boys out there in the fields. I mean, a lot of my mentors were old big row crop farmers or had done, had been selling watermelons out of the back of the pickup truck for cash for years. And so, I really learned from all of my mentors that I had more about the handshake approach to a lot of my stuff. And I've had to switch it over the years as, we get more and more.
A new produce manager changes things, and you can't control that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think to some of our biggest produce, some of our biggest grocery stores, and I go, man, if Wes ever retires, we are screwed, unless he's training somebody up underneath him. But, with Whole Foods and whatnot, at least with my experience, and I've heard, well, yours, but plenty of other experiences that have been negative, I've been really, really successful with Whole Foods and door-to-door organics before they went out of business. And so kind of my bigger customers that we move most of our volume towards, when we sit down at the beginning of the year, they'll say, we'll take this many pounds a week, and they stick to it. And if they end up realizing they can't move that in the Kansas City area, they go, let's ship it to Colorado, and we'll distribute it to the other stores. I've been very fortunate on that, but I also think back to when we got started and meeting with our very first Hy-Vee, and they go, oh, we go through 10 cases of tomatoes a day. No, they don't. There's no way. And even sitting there, I knew that wasn't the case. And so I was already, preparing. I quickly learned that whatever they said, just divide it by 2, and that's probably what you might be able to sell them. But really, we've tried to focus beyond the grocery stores. But that being said, I did set up one of my Amish growers this year with 9 grocery stores. My Amish grower had met with them, and I think this contributed to some of their failure this year, where they saw the stars. The 9 grocery stores, they were saying they could go through, I think it was 800 boxes of tomatoes a week, which is just ridiculous. There's no way. And I tried to warn Stanley and his farm that that's not the case, but they planted for that, and we really struggled to move all of their excess tomatoes, and they struggled to move the rest that we couldn't, because they, like I said, saw the stars and didn't think more realistically about it. And so it's always a struggle. I'd say my biggest struggle is the restaurants. And that's why we're developing an online ordering system this year, to try and make it easier for chefs, because they can get on and order from Cisco or US Foods or Benny Keith all online or from their smartphone. And, for me, I have to text them, and they usually don't wake up till 11 in the morning. And, I'd rather have them be able to, at 2 o'clock when they're going home drunk, get on and order, because maybe they'll order more. But, like the restaurants are always a big, difficult thing to manage.
They're variable.
Yeah. Every week's different. If the chef's out for a day, you might not even have an order for that place because the sous chef went right through Cisco. I mean, it's amazing how quick that changes. And so, that's why we really try and have a diversified group of markets. And so we do a lot of grocery stores. For 16 grocery stores, if I'm thinking right. And then also the distribution center for Whole Foods, Rocky Mountain region. And so our stuff ends up all over Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming through that. And then we also do about 25 restaurants. We do 4 school districts, and then a number of wholesalers in Kansas City too. And then at the end of the day, because I'm going up to Amish country every week to go pick up produce, if I have excess produce that we just don't have a market for, before we dump it on the compost pile, we take it up to the produce auction. So it's kind of the full circle. Where I started this whole brokering thing, we're taking stuff back at the end of the day just to try and make something back on it. But yeah, like I said, the whole brokering thing, 3 years ago, I didn't think about that at all as an opportunity, and it's something we are trying to grow very quickly now. There's not really many. I mean, there's the big produce companies that are doing local food, but they aren't throwing a grower's name on the box. They're just saying it's a local bell pepper and they're sourcing from 10 growers. Well, we have the story of Stanley and his, first generation Amish farm, and we have the story of Roger and his 4 children and how they make this 5 acres, a living. And we label it all as those farms. And so it's been a very good thing for everybody, because we've been able to sell their story for a higher dollar value than C&C can sell their local box, which means we can put more money in their pocket and ours, which works out really well. But anyway, I need to move on. I think I got the 30-minute thing, which...
That's just till question.
Okay, well, good. I'm glad I'm moving so slow. Example 2, as I said earlier, getting into that hay business, we were having to move a lot of our hay out of the area, out of the region, out of the state, because there was the glut of hay in our area. Well, you needed to turn that around, and thankfully we made a bunch of connections, shipping that hay down in Texas and Oklahoma and southern Missouri a few years ago, because then we were able to just turn it around and turn those trucks and start shipping north again. And that worked out really well. I know for sure at least one of my big cattle farms in business this year by shipping hay in. They have a 2,000 head cow-calf pair operation, so it's a big outfit. They go through thousands of bales a year, and we've probably shipped 20 semi-loads up to them. And so that saved them because their hay yields last year, I think, they're about half of my custom business. And so they did about 1,500 bales last year. This year it was like 750. I mean, it was horrible what they got this year off their fields. And so, it kept them in business. It helped reconnect with those guys. And so, it wasn't just a one-time hay sale down to southeast Missouri. Now he's received a check. Checks have gone both ways. And so it's just built a really good relationship with people out of state. So this one, I'm going to talk about more like tomorrow in the whole pack house design, but 2 years ago, in 2017, one of our largest vegetable customer at the time was Door to Door Organics. It was a grocery delivery company. I think they had just expanded into Des Moines and Omaha before they went bankrupt, but we were shipping a lot of produce to them. I mean, they were our pallet customer, our only pallet customer. They were one of the reasons we bought the truck back in 2014. I mean, it was an email at like 11:50 at night that they were going out of business, and at midnight their emails were out and their server was down, and I mean, it was overnight. $40 million in debt. Long story short, they said no to Amazon and they lost. But anyway, so they just shut down, and what I did the next morning is I called the highest up I knew, who is my vegetable sales guy, or my vegetable buyer in Denver, and I said, how can I buy your stuff? Sorry you lost your job and you didn't know it was going to happen until, this afternoon, but how can I buy your stuff? And so we ended up getting connected with the liquidation company, and this is kind of one of those things where, if one big thing I've always done in my life is if I see an opportunity that I know is going to pay off, this didn't take a business plan. It took 30 minutes with an Excel spreadsheet and photos in Denver to figure out I was going to be able to make money on this. But got in touch with the liquidation company. We actually lost the bid for the Kansas City warehouse to a big dairy farm that does glass bottle milk around Kansas City. But so I had kind of given up on it. I was like, all right, well, we won't expand the pack house. We'll just keep dealing with what we're doing, which was a 53-foot refrigerated trailer we had bought as extra storage and then a little cool bot room. But they called me a few days later and said, well, nobody bid on the Colorado one. So I was out in Denver the next day, or Lafayette, looking the next day at a 19,000 square foot warehouse with all this stuff in it. So, it was a big concern for me when I got that email from Door to Door saying that they were going out of business. Thankfully, we had been paid, and we were about, it was end of November, so it was about the end of the season for us. But it was what are we going to do with $75,000 worth of just gone? That's a big thing to think about, especially when you're trying to grow really quickly, and every lost sale is a lost sale. But the solution was to become a vegetable broker. There's me standing in it the first night we had the key to it. It was 19,000 square feet of stuff, and if any of you guys listen to the Packhouse thing tomorrow, I'm gonna say the exact same thing. It was a lot of stuff. I hired 3 Amish growers, my right-hand man and I. We spent 5 days between Christmas and New Year's taking this whole place down, 9 cold storage units, and I think it was 5 semi-loads, a Penske truck, and a gooseneck trailer that went out in 5 days. It was crazy. Everything from walk-in freezers to true merchandiser coolers to, I think like 40 trash cans. I got more trash cans on the farm than I've ever had before. It's great. Everybody still drops stuff on the floor, though. But buying them out, at a fraction of what any of that stuff would cost new. I mean, it was a very nerve-wracking. I had never dealt with refrigeration equipment or hiring multiple, all the semis I'd ever worked with before were just good old boys. You just called and dealt with. I had never actually tried to line up truck after truck after truck after truck. and it all fell into place, and it helped create a lot of connections. There's very few things I look back on that 5 days and regret. One of them was selling our forklift batteries out there. I didn't want the weight on the truck as we drove it back. I sold the old, they were both dead, but, things like that I regret. But, we were able to not only make up for some lost revenue from that, kind of early December sales that we would have done to door, like of the winter squash and stuff, but it helped us bring infrastructure into our community. And so we've sold freezer units to a meat distribution or a local slaughterhouse that we're now going to start carrying their meat next year through another distributor on behalf of them. We've helped 3 or 4 other vegetable growers build cold storage units. I got 9 cold storage units out of this deal, and so it was it was better for the community because I knew I wasn't going to need them all. There's no way I could, 3,800 square feet of cold storage. That's a lot of cold storage, and so it was just a real joy and treat to be able to get the infrastructure we needed for ourselves, and then have some to be able to share with our community to help everybody take that next step. But I guess solution number 4, we needed more plastic culture, and so, like I said, we started out with these 2 little 20 by 96 foot high tunnels, really small. I guess in my mind they were really small. We could only put 180 tomato plants in each. And so we never really got into them. They were small enough. We'd grow our lettuce, so we'd start planting lettuce in the end of February, and we'd get it all harvested, put tomatoes in, and pull those out around Labor Day and throw lettuce in. And it worked, but our markets were big enough to where if we planted at the end of February and then we planted the second tunnel the week later, we'd have a great one harvest of lettuce. We could clear out an entire tunnel of lettuce in one harvest, and then we'd do the next one, and then we wouldn't have any lettuce for 3 weeks because we couldn't get into the field, and so there'd be that gap, and so that was really bad for business. And buying new tunnels has personally kind of been out of the question for me. I bought a house last year. I bought land a few years ago. My debt to asset ratio is not exactly pretty, and so to go out and buy infrastructure like this was going to be a little bit of a challenge, even with the grants. And so, so we got out of growing slicer tomatoes and cherry tomatoes. Actually, those are cherry tomatoes. That's all we've grown for the past few years, because when it rains around us, it rains, and those cherry tomatoes or slicers just split very easily.
How much is a high tunnel, and do you know?
So this one was a 20 by 96 built by Hummer International out of St. Joseph, Missouri. And it was, we figured with the custom end walls we built, excluding, my labor and my father's labor because he helped me build them, they were about $6,300. I think the kit altogether was like $4,800. But once you bought the steel and all the polycarbonate ends and all that, it ended up being about $6,300 a piece. Now, with the 2/3 cost share from the NRCS, we got to think about $4,100 from them, if I'm not mistaken, in grant money. And so I think it's a very viable thing, but these were just too small for us. First off, I would never do a 20-foot wide again. It's just not big enough. You need at least a 30, and you need Gothic sides. Just getting the hoop, it's a small little. We're gonna turn both of ours into greenhouses for this upcoming year. They should be putting posts in the ground today. And even then, I think they're going to be too small. But our big expansion, and I don't have any good pictures of it because without plastic on them, you really can't see the scale. But we're going from 3,840 square feet to 49,800 something square feet, because we found a grower in Missouri, once again through the brokering and doing a lot of networking through the vegetable trade. Found a guy that was getting out of the wholesale tomato business in Missouri, really only about 45 miles west of Kansas City. Now, there's not many of these hay grove systems in the Midwest. They're not really something people know about around here, and so we were very fortunate to find one, 70 miles away that was for sale for a fifth of the cost of they are new. Brand new, a system like this is about $120,000 or something. We were able to get it for a little over 20. And so originally he had it under 2 acres on 8-foot spacing of the post, and we basically shrunk it to 4-foot spacing, and so doubled it up so that hay groves are traditionally meant to be a spring, summer, fall, no winter. In talking with the hay grove guys, they still think I'm kind of nuts, but they think it's doable to do year-round growing in these things by taking it to 4-foot spacing on the post. And so this has been one of our winter projects, which, in a way, I don't want to say it's another enterprise because it's not, but it's been a good way to keep employees around. Kind of having that kind of construction business in the wintertime of us putting up our own stuff. Because normally, December 5th hits and it's like, all right, see you guys. And Kyle, my right-hand man, my farm manager stays around for the winter full time just because that's our deal. But, he'll just kind of hang out. Everybody else, has to go find another job for the winter, where we've been able to keep everybody this year.
How many employees?
So this time of year, let's see, I have 4, and then a custom, like a contractor that works for me. But in the, on season, we'll have between, I like to keep 7 at a minimum. I really need about 12. But we were talking earlier, what'd you say, you went through 40 this year? I went through 27 just to keep 7 people on staff. It's impossible to find labor these days. But, as I said, we were able to keep the harvest crew and we turned them into the construction crews. That was great to keep them because they were, anybody that sticks around till the end of the year, that's who you want to keep for next year. And I usually lose 1 or 2 of those folks every winter to they get another job, whether or not it pays more, they realize it's easier. It's not farming, and then they don't come back. So, now we're going to have over an acre of high tunnel, so that's awesome. But yeah, 2018 was a year of bluff for us. It sucked. We had a wonderful set of contracts with Whole Foods and the Price Chopper Hen House folks in Kansas City, 30 grocery stores. But then we had a hailstorm roll through, and it destroyed 6 acres of our high dollar stuff. So I don't have a picture of our spinach, but imagine that's Swiss chard, and it's a little choppy with this projector. But, it just shredded everything. The hail was about the size of, like, Sonic ice. Think about that. So about dime size or so. But, that's a bok choy leaf right there. It just absolutely destroyed, our spring crop. Thankfully, because we have different fields at different locations, our watermelon was fine. Our early planted winter squash, and we had a lot of crops that weren't damaged, but those were our summer crops, so they weren't ready. And so we had about 3 or 4 weeks where, I relied on the brokering as our revenue. But, let me go back. So on top of the hailstorm, so we had that early May. So right as we were hitting peak lettuce season, we were shipping 2,000 pounds a week at that point of leaf lettuce, cut leaf lettuce. And so that was like, that's our revenue season right there, baby. And we lost it. And I believe we have yet to get the insurance payout, but I think it's going to be about $1,100 for about $40,000 of crops. And so, I have to say the NAP program is not my favorite with the USDA. But so on top of that, then we went from that drought into went from that hailstorm into a severe drought. My hay yields were down 40 to 60%. I made, like I said, about 2,800 round bales this year. I should have made 4,000 plus this year with the amount of it, because we picked up about 300 more acres this year than we had ever done before. And then it also stunted our summer and fall vegetable crops. The watermelon and the pumpkins, they thrive in drought, and so that was okay. And the winter squash did fine, or some of the winter squash did fine. Anything that was planted in the river valley did fine. I had 10 acres of winter squash that was planted in hill ground, so heavier soil, lower water table. It never came to fruition. It sat in the ground for 3 weeks, and then it just stayed small. So that was sad. So that drought really set us back, and it also stalled the fall vegetables. And then we had an early freeze on top of everything. About October 10th, we had our first hard freeze, and so anything that wasn't covered died. And it was a year of just junk. But all of that. Oh, and then going into the winter, we had taken down those 2 little baby tunnels to put in the mega tunnel, so we didn't have any winter crops hardly. So just you can think about that and go, oh, well, it must have been a horrible year. We ended up making about $90,000 profit this year, about a 14% margin. So, all that being said, profits from the vegetable distribution, the hay brokerage, and I think, Yeah, a banker loved it. I mean, because I was able to go in and show him pictures of the hailstorm and talk about how crappy, and I think he assumed I was going to have to, ask for another loan, and I was like, oh, I'm going to be able to pay everything back this year, and he just loved me. But so our hay, even though our yields were down, the personal hay enterprise, the 400 acres we do, we're making money on this year because hay prices are astronomical right now. Any returning customer we have, we're treating them with the price that we sent out in our price email in June before we knew it was going to be as bad of a year, because we want to keep them coming back and keep them in business. But new customers are paying that premium, and it's very apparent out there right now. Bales that were going for $60 a bale last year are going for $100 this year, if not more. And 3 years ago, that same bale was going for $35. I mean, that when I was in that glut, I was lucky to get $35 for a bale that went for $60 last year that's going for $100 now. And
Quick question here. Of course, this is just focused on the state of Iowa, but about 60 dairy farmers went out of business in the state of Iowa because hay was so expensive. They just couldn't keep up. So it's been very challenging. Who are you selling to when you're talking about your big regions like Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri? Is that to the cattle producers?
a lot of beef cattle.
Not the dairy, but just the
A lot of beef cattle is where my hay goes. Yeah, I don't have enough alfalfa to really establish a good, broad regional dairy market. All of our alfalfa stays local. We sell. There's a lot of local goat farms and sheep farms, and I sell to some people that have a little goat dairy. But generally, when we're selling locally, it's to very small diversified farms, and then we ship, the semi-loads out to more feedlot style or big,
cattle, the big cattle.
big cow-calf operators.
And then they must take a blend, not just straight alfalfa. That would be
No, they'll get the brome grass, or they'll get the mixed grass, which is, I have plenty of fields that are just like brome, fescue, prairie. It's just a little bit of everything in it. And so, we have different markets for different things. We ship to a horse farm. I hate them, but the horse people, wonderful. But we ship quite a bit of really, really high quality round bales out to Colorado to a big horse farm. But it's, also one of those challenges. That's one of the ones I can consistently rely on regardless of the supplies in our area. The price in our area, I can consistently rely on a high price from that Colorado group because we send really good quality stuff. But it's also horse people. It's a challenge every day. But anyway, so hay prices are high. The vegetable brokering and distribution did great. Hay brokering and distribution did great. And, those are all businesses we not only want to grow, but, you'll notice all three of those, I guess the hay's farming, but the hay brokerage and the vegetable brokerage, that's not really farming in that sense. And so we're entering into businesses that aren't particularly tied to the weather in that sense, because even if my Amish grower has a bad tomato year, they're still going to have tomatoes that we ship, and we're still going to get a margin off of that. And so we're trying to diversify into things that are a little bit, have a little bit more of a safety net to them. But you can see, basically the agriculture side did not make money this year. The custom hire operation lost money because we did half as many custom round bales as we usually do. The row crops, you heard it earlier, what did I say, 170 bushel and then like 70? I mean, it was horrible. And then the vegetables, well, you guys saw we talked about all that. And so, kind of going beyond that, so how do you diversify yours? These are kind of some of the things I thought about as I got into what I got into, and whether or not I'm in the right stuff, I have no idea. I'll probably be broke and working for Cargill here in a few years. Who knows? But what are some of your strengths? I like talking with people. I like networking. I like finding connections and meeting with other producers. And so that vegetable distribution and brokerage just fell right into place. I love it. But then what assets do you have? So that was an example of the refrigerated truck, trying to leverage that, and leverage those assets into a new enterprise. And so, the custom hay side, I didn't really expect to get into that until I had, that really crappy square baler, and the guy across the street said, hey, can you bring that little crappy thing over and make me a whole bunch of crappy square bales? And before I knew it, I was in the custom game. And that's become a huge part of our operation. That is also a part of the operation that the bank can visualize and the USDA can visualize when we go for loans. I really struggled to get any loans for the vegetable side of the operation because it was, so new and they didn't know what it was. But as soon as I said I did hay, they said, how much you need? And so, by doing the row crops and the hay, I've been able to, I don't know. It makes us look a little bit more traditional, which I think makes them look a little happier. They appreciate our balance sheet a little bit better. But do you have skills or assets? I have a minor in agronomy from Iowa State, and so when I offered to go do the soil samples and look at those samples and build up fertilizer regimens, I mean that was something that some of my hay customer ranchers. First off, they don't like to manage their grass, and secondly, they never went to school. So, I mean, they just go, grass looks good this year, and, like, that's what they got. And so, I had skills, and some of my employees have skills that we're leveraging now into new enterprises. Another reason we got into the vegetable brokerage or also the hay brokerage was, can our customers buy more from us? Can we become more of their one-stop shop? And by, adding, I keep going back to the vegetable brokerage because that's been where we've seen the most benefit from stuff like this. Now instead of our restaurant just buying arugula and onions from us, they're buying this, that, and that. And so we've been able to add more boxes to each stop on top of new customers because now they don't have to order as much from Cisco, or they might even not have to work with another grower in that sense. We're able to kind of be that one-stop shop for a lot of our restaurants now, which has been really good. And then, it does come with a lot of challenges. How do you keep track of it all? 2019 will be the first year I have a bookkeeper. And so I have struggled with keeping track of everything. It's been a lot of, I'll work till 11, I'll go home and do bookkeeping till 1, and then wake up at 6 and start all over. It's horrible. I'm not a fun person to be around end of July. I'm not. But there's more record keeping. As we got into vegetable brokers, because there's a lot of GAP certification stuff, there's a ton of vegetable traceability we have. Training to keep the organic stuff on its own pallet and the conventional stuff on its own pallet. And not only that, but then have a sticker magnet in the cold storage that says organic only on this pallet. And teaching everybody that, and then making sure that even though you've taught them 5 times, they actually do it. And then also enterprises that start really slowly, which in that sense was the first year we did the brokering. Because I was bringing stuff back, but people were like, well, where's it from? And in part because it was from the auction, I'd go, it's just from the auction. And they'd go, well, where's it from? And I could say it was small family farms, Amish farms, but we couldn't trace it back to the farm. And so it was kind of awkward. It's like, here's this beautiful eggplant. We don't know where it's truly from, but it's local. So it took a little while to get that off and going that first year. And I've definitely struggled with poor planning or lack of time to really dedicate to launching. Last year, in 2018, we wanted to launch this CSA we're working on this year. We really started pushing on planning of it in early February. But, by the time March hit, you're busy. You're starting plants, you're out in the field, you're doing all that. We were building a pack house at the time, and I gave up on it. After meeting with a couple companies on the corporate CSA side, I just called them all and said, we'll talk to you next year. I got to go. I'm busy. And so, that was really a lack of time and poor planning on that end to not have thought about, meeting with them in January and February when we do have time. And then the managing of the new logistics. You need more insurance. When we started doing the brokering, we went from $2 million of liability to $5 million so we could make sure we covered our butts. New record-keeping devices. This year I'm going to get an iPad for the truck so that they can keep track of all their deliveries on the truck. They're going to have an iPad in the pack house to enter in all their food traceability into our thing, just so that we don't have as much paper. I'm horrible at keeping all the records we need to keep organized. When my organic certifier shows up, I just kind of hand him a giant thing and go, here you go. And he just takes it back to Oklahoma and yells at me over the phone about it, and then, yeah, it all works out usually. And then how do you schedule the enterprises into the rest of your operation? And that's been a little bit of a struggle as our vegetable farm has taken off. Our truck only holds 8 pallets, and now we're, hiring another truck up to Iowa, which I could be saving money on if I just took our truck up if it were a bigger truck, and that's why we're going to upgrade, because we can only hold 8 pallets. We really need to be able to hold 12 everywhere we go now. And so, trying to just figure out how to make it all work. But let's see. And it's also, it's not always cheap and it's not always easy. And you never know if it'll actually have the return on income. I recommend anybody try and do at least a rough capital budget of something when they try and launch it. But I was an ag biz kid at Iowa State, so that's one of those things I loved doing when I got out of school. The debt to asset ratio, just about everything I've gone to my banker with, even though we have a pretty high debt to asset ratio, it's not exactly the prettiest number I'd like to see. It's something that I think will make us money in 2 years, and so he's been pretty forgiving with us. And he knows that we're kind of expanding really rapidly right now. But, and then are you willing to dump time and money into something that may only offer a slight benefit? That hay brokering that we're doing, I'm making a little bit per load, but it's like $300. And so, I've made some money, but it's not a lot. And so if I have to drive, start driving down to Missouri here in a few weeks to meet new hay buyers, it's probably not worth it for me. So once the guys I'm working with right now are out of hay, I'm probably going to be out of hay brokering for the winter. But, the benefits, for us, that brokering was huge. Maybe it'll allow you to upgrade to that next tractor, or maybe you'll be able to get into a Whole Foods. We ship a lot of our Amish stuff to the Whole Foods now, and U.S. Foods and things like that. So it's been great for adding new markets. And it also really did help us take that next step and cold chain by, allowing us to put up the pack house and food safety and all of that. But, sometimes enterprises just fall into place. Other times they don't. And it doesn't always make sense, but I've started plenty that didn't make sense, and it comes together eventually. I guess that's why I'm a farmer. But, you guys can read that, and, I don't need to go over it. But, I've never really regretted any of the things I've gotten into. The square bales were a ton of work when I started. I regret them now. Because it just takes a lot of time and we can't cover as many acres per day, but I wouldn't be as mechanically sound or as able if I didn't have those. So with that, I guess I'm getting the time card. Questions? Uh-huh.
How did Amazon put the warehouse out of business?
So, okay, long story short, Door-to-Door Organics was very high in debt. Amazon approached them because they liked the logistics and the technology they had, and the investors said, we can do better, and they said no. And about 6 months later, Amazon announced that they were buying Whole Foods, and about 4 months later, Door-to-Door went out of business. So it was just one of those, I think Door-to-Door thought of themselves as a little too highly of themselves and shot themselves in the foot, because they could be, Whole Foods could be independently owned still. Had that not happened. But so that was really the long story short. They were about $40 million in debt when they went under. So the investors just pulled out.
How is your business organized, or is it multiple businesses?
So that's a really good question. How is my business organized? I saw the card that time. Might have had to squint, but I saw it. So how's my business organized? Is it multiple companies? Right now, currently, everything is under one LLC, Juniper Hill Farms. We've added another LLC for the CSA, so we can minimize our risk on that, because we're going to have additional, we're going to be renting a van to do the CSA deliveries and things, and have another driver. And so, as I've talked to my accountant, we need to move the truck into a new LLC, like a shipping distribution. But I think some of this has been not having a bookkeeper full-time or even part-time, me having to do it all. It's just easier to have one QuickBooks instead of 3 or 4. But I know in the coming years we'll definitely be splitting off into others and trying to minimize risk for any given thing. My house that I have is actually in a separate LLC. I didn't put it under my name or the farm name. And so I pay myself, that pays that company that pays the mortgage. And so that if I'm ever sued on the farm and I lose that, I don't lose my house or anything else. And so it's just some of those, and that's you end up talking to your accountant and then a lawyer and figuring out what works. Mm-hmm.
So you chose LLC over corporation. Why?
Originally, years ago, and I don't know how much you guys pay attention to Kansas politics, but we elected not a horrible person, but just a bad person named Sam Brownback, who thought that if we just slashed everything in Kansas, we would just explode with people and the state would thrive. So at the time, if you were an LLC, you didn't have to pay a single dime in income tax, no matter how much you made. And so even the Koch brothers were changing things to LLCs. It was crazy. I mean, Spirit Aero Systems, they're a $15 billion a year company, became an LLC. I mean, things like that. It was nuts. And so it's what everybody would do. Start it under the thing that minimizes your tax. And so that's what we did. This year, for the 2018 tax year, I met with my accountant like December 27th, and we had to make the call of like switch to an S corp before the end of the year, or a C corp. So we're an LLC for 2018, but 2019 tax year we're going to switch to, I believe it's an S corp or a C corp. And then with that, I'll start paying myself payroll tax instead of just writing myself a check and not paying tax on that. So it'll change. I don't have all the answers to that. That's why I have a good accountant.
You're going to be paying into Social Security
Mm-hmm.
time
Yeah.
for your retirement?
Yeah, the only other paycheck, I guess I was a tutor at Iowa State for a couple semesters, so that was a paycheck, and then my sweet corn gig in 7th and 8th grade. So those are the only, like, 2 payroll checks I've ever had.
The difference of why you're going from the LLC to the S corp?
It's just tax reasons, and I could not explain it all. With the new tax bill, it's going to make more sense to be an S corp. I know that. I wish I could give you more, but I just do what Caroline tells me to do. Anybody else?
Can you remind me how you acquired your land? Was it like family or you grew over?
So my family in '99, they weren't farmers, but we moved out to about 100 acres north of the river, and so that's where our first 10 acres of vegetables went. When I went, our first quarter acre, but where I started playing around. And my parents they were very supportive, and they still help me out when I really need help. But they were always very much, we'll help you, but we expect you to pay rent. And when I was 16 and I bought that tractor, I couldn't sign a loan to buy my first tractor, and so they, signed the note for me. I made the payments, and it's always been one of those things where they were very supportive, but they didn't just want to give it to me because, like anybody, I think if you give anybody too much up front, they just, we don't even have to explain that. I think everybody knows what happens. You just piss it off and give up. And so, starting with that junk equipment was fantastic for me. Because, it allowed me to just struggle and be in 105-degree heat with a broken square baler, looking at a whole big field knowing it's going to rain that night and going, how am I going to do this? For years, I knew a knotter like the back of my hand. In fact, a few years ago, I was driving around and I saw somebody out in a field, every other bale was broken. I pulled up and said, let me give you a hand. I looked at his knot and did that, and it fixed. Yeah, he was stunned because he'd been out there working on it for 2 hours, and, it was just, yeah. So, it was one of those things where when I started, I didn't know the difference between a wrench and a socket. I really did. I didn't know the difference between anything. I was a horrible mechanic. And so, starting with that, bad equipment really helped me, learn the work ethic. And now that I have that, good equipment, now it's how do I take that work ethic and turn that into efficiency. But any more questions? I answered them all.
I did have one.
Uh-huh.
This is just purely a technical question. You were saying that taking the post spacing on your new
Uh-huh.
tunnel is, how is that going to make it into a winter?
So originally it was, and I said 8 earlier, but it's like 7 3/4 feet is what they had it at. And so when I bought it from Brett, the grower that got out of the tomato business, it was 90-something thousand square feet. And so it was basically everything was stretched. So he had like 2 acres under cover, whereas we only have just over 1. So he basically took it from that 7 3/4 down to 4. And so we didn't quite double up, but got close to doubling up the amount of steel that's going to be underneath the plastic. And so in doing that, we're hoping that increases the structural integrity. We don't get much snow around us anymore. We had,
So it's purely a structural integrity.
Yeah.
You're talking about the heat.
yeah, no, it'll have no benefit on heat or anything. Around us, boy, and just looking at the weather this week before I came up to Ames, it just made me reminiscent of Iowa. How it is much colder here than it is in Kansas. My mom used to call me when I was at Iowa State going, it's just bitter cold, it's 20 degrees. And I'd be like, it's zero here. So it's just it's a much, between I-70 and I-80 and I-80 and I-90, there's just huge differences in climate. And for us, we can grow. I mean, we have spinach out in the field right now. We do have one plot of spinach right now that we harvested off last week. That's just under a simple, like, one sheet of row cover, and that's it. And so this high tunnel, we're going to be able to grow year-round in on the cold crops, if we can just get it sealed up. And so we're planning to do every 3 tunnels, we're going to have an inner curtain and really try and, create zones to where, and I think primarily what we'll grow will be kale and spinach and leaf lettuce, and I don't even know if we'll do our greens blend and stuff because arugula doesn't particularly like the cold. And so, we're just going to focus on those things we know we have a market for in the wintertime. But yeah, no, that's a good question. The 4-foot was just strictly to increase the snow load capabilities. And, last week we got 5 inches of really, really wet snow. And I think what we would have done, and this is what our hay grove guys recommended, if you do have snow come, just push the plastic up. It's not actually wiggle wired in, it's roped on. And so in the summertime, you actually push the plastic up to get more ventilation. It's going to be a whole new monster that we're dealing with. I mean, it's going to be, the more I read about it, the more I regret it, kind of. It's going to be great, but Kyle and I are going, man, the first 50-mile-an-hour wind, it's going to throw us all for a loop. But, yeah, if they were predicting a heavy snow load, probably what we do is just push the plastic off and just let it snow in the tunnel, insulate all the stuff, and then just put the plastic back on the next day, or unfurl it. It's gonna be really interesting, and I'm happy to show you more pictures on my phone afterwards. It's gonna be a whole new ball game. It's 13 bays that are 152 feet long and 25 feet wide, and we're going from 2 that were 20 by 96, and so it's a different world. We're gonna hire a full-time employee for that. And I would love to get some H2As because that's our biggest. That's what keeps me up at night is whether or not we have the labor to do what we're doing. We have the markets, but it's just finding enough labor. We're hoping to hire a full-time delivery driver this year, and you throw that in with another full-time employee, and it's great. But can you keep them around? That's our biggest struggle. I'm sure it's yours too. Any more questions?
Any advice for working with restaurants and projections and then back communicating with farms in your brokerage business and distribution?
So the biggest thing, we send out an email twice a week, every week, along with text messages to all of our chefs. The chefs don't read emails. Never do, never will. And so, you'll text me like, we got a whole bunch of new things. They're like, what are they? And it's like, check your email. And then they just text back, what are they? So, you basically have to sell yourself through the text message or phone to the chef because they won't look at emails, or at least mine don't. But really for us, if we know there's a product coming on in 2 weeks, we'll call and say, hey, we're going to have carrots in 2 weeks. And, maybe they're, little baby carrots in 2 weeks because we were off a week. But, it's always good to stay ahead in terms of approaching them with stuff. You don't want to start picking zucchini and then call them, because it's going to take a week for them to figure it out, especially some of the ones that do more of a seasonal menu and don't change up every week. A lot of my chefs, I'm sitting down to have a beer with now, and they're going, what are you going to have in September? That's when we're switching from our summer to fall menu. And so we're just basically looking back at QuickBooks or our record keeping from the year before and going, what were we selling you in September? That's what we're going to have. It's getting easier and easier to kind of just mess with the chef's head sometimes because they'll go, what do you have in September? It's like exactly what we had last year and then some. But no, that's the one I struggle with. There's a lot of days where I would rather just take it to Liberty Fruit or CNC, one of the wholesalers in Kansas City, and let them deal with the chefs. Because boy, it's just, it's a lot of time on the phone and a lot of text messages and a lot of communication to sell, $100 worth of vegetables. So we do have a minimum $50 delivery in Lawrence and a $100 delivery in Kansas City for any restaurant, just to make it semi-worth our while. And, if one restaurant in Kansas City orders $100, and nobody else orders anything, we'll just call them and say we can't, justify shipping the truck for that. And then every single stop we make, whether it's a truckload or, that $50, those 2-3 cases or radishes that are going out to a restaurant, it's a $5 delivery charge. And so just that $5, that pays for our insurance and fuel for that. Well, not quite all the fuel, but pays for insurance and some of the fuel for that refrigerated truck to run every year. But yeah, I don't have a great answer. Chefs are a pain in the ass. At least produce managers, when you wake up, they're at work. Chefs will text you like 5 in the afternoon, be like, "Hey, can I get some spinach for tomorrow?" And it's like, we harvested at 7, so of course you can get some, but anyway. Yeah, exactly. That sleep till 11, it just destroys me. Anyway.
We still have 5 minutes, so any questions?
Anybody?
Can you briefly talk about your other presentation, just like a summary of what else you're going to be talking about?
So, if I'm remembering right, and I still have one of them I need to work on tonight, I'm going to be doing a presentation tomorrow afternoon. And I'm forgetting her last name, but a woman named Emily, who has a farm up in Decorah. And we're going to be talking about enterprise budgets. And it was neat. We talked on the phone the other day, and we approach enterprise budgets, which is basically figuring out the profitability and the margins of any particular crop or enterprise on your farm. We approach it 2 totally different ways. I get down to like how many feet of drip line per bed or per acre are we going through, and I cost everything out, and she does it completely differently. And a lot of mine are by the acre, and a lot of hers are by the bed. And so that's going to be a really interesting hour of talking about different ways to think about enterprise budgets. I'm doing another one on pack house design and layout. When we started, we built a little like 10 by 12 or 10 by 10 room, cool bot room, with a little air conditioner and all that, and it was great, but it was a 10 by 10 room. And we dealt with that and our refrigerated truck and a 53-foot refrigerated trailer until July of this year. And then we moved into a 15 by 25-foot cold storage and a 10 by 20 freezer for the meat side that I didn't even mention. Kind of talking about what went into that, being out in a rural area, we had single-phase power. Everything we had was 3-phase. So I'm going to kind of talk about, figuring all that out and how many electricians we scared off. And then, let's see, the last one I think is weeding and machinery.
Yeah, weed management and machinery for vegetable production.
Yeah, so essentially that one's going to be pretty simple. I'm going to try and limit the amount of words on there and just show pictures and videos. And that one's going to be pretty simple. That one is more pictures worth 1,000 word kind of deal. I'd rather not throw as many words up there, because I can, it's all scale. To your farm. When we started, we had a tiller and the earthway seeder, and we still use an earthway seeder for a ton of stuff. It's shocking how that seeder is. It's like the one thing besides the stirrup hose and stuff that stayed from day one until now. We actually had to order new openers for that earthway seeder because we wore them out. So that's I guess those are the other 3 I'm giving. So hopefully you guys don't get too tired of me. Yes and no. So I'm part of a leadership program, called Carl in Kansas. I'm sure you guys have one similar. Ours stands for Kansas and Ag Rural Leaders. It's been a 2-year program, so 3 days a month I've been going to a different part of the state and learning. And it's not really a vacation, but it gets me away from the farm and gets me to network. We are going to go to Cuba for 10 days here in March with that. So that'll be really neat. And then I went backpacking for, a week out in Arizona, over New Year's. So went out and just backpacked around Sedona and Grand Canyon and whatnot. So yeah, it's like wintertime I'll go ski. Well, and like mid-February I'm going to go out to Colorado to meet with Whole Foods, and like, you're damn right I'm going to be out there skiing for a day or 2. It's a business expense. But that is a struggle, the work-life balance, especially in the summertime. And I'm hoping to slowly, by building this leadership team, although, being a young farmer, there's not too much extra money to just throw out there for staff. But I know in the long run, if I start bringing in staff, we can become a stronger, more profitable operation by not having me stretched so thin. So, that's something that I struggle with for sure, especially in the summertime. But, farming is kind of my life and my hobby. They say it's a way of life, and it really is. My employees that you can tell won't be farmers in the future, they get annoyed when it's not that 8 to 5 with lunch. But the ones like Kyle that that I see, even though he's a first generation guy too, I see him being there for the long run. Or Springer, the contract guy we work with, they'll work till midnight and they'll see me at 6 in the morning, and we'll all be tired and grumpy at each other, but we're good to go. But yeah, no, it's a definite struggle for sure. All right, thanks guys.
During the